What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? We have got a interesting episode for you. With me always is Taylor.
Hello, guys.
Kind of keeping
And
the
gals.
keeping the conversation going. But we've got a special guest named Chris, and I'll kind of let him tell you your story. But we all wish we knew or understood how the far right gets to be the far right, and fortunately we have somebody who's peeked beyond the curtain, ran behind the curtain, and has found their way back out. So we're calling this a hard look at the far right. I liked that little title you came up with there.
I mean, it was a
good
little
one.
bit, it was either like that or
Uh-huh.
between the, look under the hood
Yeah.
sort of situation we were joking about. It's a little bit more serious to say.
I liked the hood one too, but Anyway, so Chris, kind of give us just your quick and dirty background here.
Well, when we say hard right, let's specify it was the National Alliance, which was at the time the preeminent neo-Nazi organization in America, probably peaking at around 1,500, 2,000 dues-paying members, but their influence reached way beyond that. We've all heard of the Turner Diaries and Pierce's other book, Hunter, and to this day, there are still people out there that want to actually follow through with the Turner Diaries up to the point of the day of the rope and killing millions. So obviously, I pay close attention to what's going on now and how the views that we had 20 years ago, over 20 years ago now, in the 90s, have made themselves more mainstream in the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And yeah, they made, like I said, we talked earlier, and like I said, they may deny being Nazis, but when you do every fucking thing the Nazis do, from persecution of trans and gays and minorities.
Well, here
Your Nazi
before we
wasn't
get
even
in before we
alive.
get into that, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But just you as a person, because so now you were a Nazi, like a legitimate card carrying Nazi, so to speak, correct?
That's the best way to explain what the National Alliance is.
All right,
Yeah,
so
or was.
give us a little bit of your background, where you grew up, how you got into it, and to be clear to all of our listeners right now, Chris is no longer a Nazi. Chris is
Clear that up.
I want to make sure that he's seen the error of his ways. He's come around, and he is kind of dedicating himself to trying to spread information about this. So we didn't bring just anybody on. This isn't the leader of the Proud Boys or something like that. But a little bit just about your background, where you grew up. You're from Alabama, and kind of how you went from just good old boy to good old boy, and then kind of back to where you are now, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty. But just the 10,000 foot view,
All
so
right.
people know where you're coming from and who you are as a person, and kind of what your story was.
All right. I grew up in West Central Alabama, which is one of the areas that's originally the Black Belt, and we have my county would be about 50% black. The town I lived in was more so, and we basically had no problems. But we did. All the white families that had any kind of money would send their kids to a segregation academy. Now, I attended these academies at the time without knowing they were segregation academies. We just thought that that's where we went. We were told we were going there because you get a better education than the public schools. But they're all white, you know.
Yep.
So,
So,
yeah, that's the Alabama Independent School Association. And those schools are still running. And when I graduated, well, actually, I didn't quite graduate. When I got out in 89, there was 269 students, kindergarten to 12. So you can imagine that there were financial forces behind keeping that school open.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, with
all these years.
that lower.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that-
so sorry to cut you off. You just mentioned
Mhm.
segregation academy, and that's a specific term I don't think I've ever heard before. Is there?
I really didn't hear it until I became more of a leaning guy.
Okay.
Because it was a private school association in Alabama, and they do allow black students.
Okay.
But you got to have a substantial amount of money to go there,
Sure.
and that was just out of reach for most of the black population of the county in the 80s. Hell, I mean, my parents worked their asses off. 50, 60 hours a week, both of them, just to be able to send us to this academy.
Hmm.
So, we were poor white folks, but they worked extra hard just to be able to do that, which that money could have been better spent.
Yeah.
I mean,
Can imagine. Not that I imagine Alabama public schools have the highest literacy and graduation and test performance rates, but
what are you talking about? We're 49th or
Well,
48th.
that's
got
right.
Mississippi to look down on, right?
God, thank God for Mississippi. Yeah, the whole South has, well, yeah, most every red state's got some education issues, but
But all right, so you
anyway,
went to a segregationist academy off and on. That's kind of the area you grew up in. So from there, then what?
um, in about '95, my dad had moved down to the Gulf Coast, the Gulf Shores area, back in '85, and been working down there because you could make a lot more money. That's where the money in Alabama was flowing toward the coast. There was a lot of new construction,
Yep.
so he went down there, and then in 10 years, I was up in Pickens County and making like $8 an hour, and I was one of the highest paid people in the industrial plant that I was working in. And I'm like, I could go down there to the coast, work with him, and start out at 15. So no brainer. I ended up moving to the coast. Um, Once I'm down there, the internet comes out. My brother gets a computer and gets on the internet. I start going over there, and like I said, the first thing on the internet, Nazis and porn. And
So this was like the
Yeah.
mid '90s,
had,
like 95,
yeah,
early AOL Instant Messenger days, that kind of stuff.
um, yeah. Well, a little after that, it would have been probably around 97, 98. I started hitting it hard, and the National Alliance was already online. And I'm not a religious guy. I walked away from religion in the early '90s. Most of your Nazi groups and Klan and racial organizations, they are some type of Christian or a Christian identity,
Yep.
and you have some pagans. But whatever floats their boat, whatever. So the National Alliance was the only one that didn't look extremist, didn't, or I'm sorry, Christian. They weren't. They weren't. Their propaganda was not above. Yeah, they were the only ones that looked good for an atheist. And like I said, the right wing is really good at drawing in a wide variety of people because they have a little something for everybody.
Hmm.
There's an extremist group out there that fits your mold or fits,
Yeah.
fits what you are.
There's an
And the
extremist
National
group out there
Alliance
for everyone.
was the National Alliance was a good match for me because they were pseudo intellectual. They made their shit sound smart.
Real Jordan
Now, if you look
Peterson,
at,
Ben Shapiro type energy.
I've never listened to Shapiro. I don't think I would be able to without breaking my phone.
it's
Um,
it's
yeah,
somewhat
but I mean,
challenging
yeah,
for the best of us
Yeah,
sometimes.
Pierce.
it's the pseudo intellectual that makes the intellectual brain hurt.
Right. So you're saying it was
Dr.
mostly
Pierce.
kind of like that, late '90s kind of internet culture that led you
Yeah.
to the National Alliance, and then from there
Yep.
things kind of took off.
Yeah, I was an Alliance guy, but we had almost no members in Alabama. We had
Well,
I got
curious.
another couple of
Before we
guys.
get to there, now you are an alliance guy, but like when did that happen? How did you go from internet lurker to a member? Like where did that draw? Because I feel like that's a big leap to go. There's a lot of assholes on the internet who will comment some bad shit, but that's where it ends. They comment some dumb shit. They have their
Yes.
own beliefs, but they aren't out there, going to meetings. So where did that transition happen for you?
It's rather amazing to look back on after all these years, but I mean it's a slow pull. Like being raised in a conservative environment. My youngest memory is staying up the night that Reagan won, and I know at the time we thought it was a good thing.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, but that's my youngest memory, and we were proud conservatives. I shit you not, I had an Ollie North for President T-shirt when I was a teenager.
Oh.
I know it's disgusting, but I mean that. But even though I was a conservative of the Reagan era, I was not a hateful person toward minorities or anything because we got along fine. I had, in the '90s, didn't go to school with any in the '80s because we were segregated. But I would hang, I'd go to town, shop at the black stores, get my rap music tapes and CDs. In the early '90s, I had black friends. I worked with a lot of black employees. I flirted with the chicks. I hung out with the dudes. Got along great.
Yeah.
I'm a real easygoing guy
Mm-hmm.
in normal. So for them to be able to suck me into this shit, I think they can get pretty much anybody under the right conditions.
Yep.
Sure.
But yeah, it just coming from a survival and prepper background, they would always push this idea that there's going to be a race war. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, well, there's a lot of tensions and this is possible. And that race war narrative was kind of drew me in. And then they would ply you with the bullshit about black crime,
Mm-hmm.
or fatherless homes or everything. And they say everything they frame will have a little bit of truth to it. They don't mention the actual causes. They don't mention
The poverty and the
the
lack of generational wealth and
yeah.
like all that kind of stuff that leads to these things. But you hear those narratives, the black on black crime and the,
LBJ like exasperated the fatherlessness and
right,
black
all
people.
that kind of shit. So like, so that's kind of what you got in there because you were, you had survivalist prepper. That was the kind of stuff you were into at the time, which
Yeah, pro gun, very much into guns.
Mhm.
Obviously, Southern boy, big on guns.
Yep.
I only had 20 when they busted me, but I made almost no money back then.
Mhm.
So
and
I
guns are
spent a
fucking
lot on ammo.
expensive, man.
Good ones
Yeah,
are.
right.
Good ones are. I had a national match M1 grand. I had two grands. But one was national match that I put $750 just in work on
Mm.
in the '90s. That fucker's a beast.
Gotta say, I'm jealous. I
Yeah,
suppose
yeah.
you don't, you can't have any of these anymore. I suppose, huh?
Nah, my sons got lucky. They inherited a nice collection. The feds took my Uzi carbine and they took a couple of Ruger 1022s because I had a silencer I built for them.
No.
Shit like that.
No. All right.
But
Anyway, so
yeah,
we'll
anyway,
get to that too. So
Yep.
you got sucked in on the prepper stuff, and then you got kind of they started tying your stuff about kind of survivalism and prepping to race, and that's sort of what.
exactly. What are you prepping for? Well, it looks like it's the fear of like, and I don't want to digress too far here.
No.
But back in the '80s, I shit you not, there were people in small southern towns that had this paranoid fear that some gang member from Chicago was going to come down there and shoot them or rob them or rape them.
Oh,
Yeah,
we have
that's
And I
that.
shit you not,
It's a pretty
a couple of months ago, a young lady friend of mine in Alabama told me the exact same thing.
Mhm.
yeah.
30 years later, we're using the same urban myths, fear bullshit
Well,
narratives.
more than 30 years.
More,
it's-
they do it. They do
Oh,
it all
yeah.
the time. They do it all the time, even up here. I mean, I live out in the country here in Minnesota, and Minnesota's obviously a tad more progressive than Alabama. But
You think?
but we get people in my hometown all the time. Oh, I hear Antifa's gonna come and start trying to riot, and then it's that Jason Aldean, try that in a small town bullshit. I'm like, they're fucking coming up here. What the fuck are they gonna do? Burn down your fucking barn? They don't give a shit. Like nobody is
Do
coming
you have
up
some
here.
fascists there that they need to deal with?
Huh?
I mean, are there some fascists around there that Antifa needs to deal with?
I mean, always,
Wow.
but they're they go for population density. Like it's not something that's gonna happen around here. And there's plenty of crime around
come
here,
on.
obviously, but it ain't Antifa and BLM committing the crime, and we talked about this
Obviously.
a little bit too, but we'll get into that. Sorry, I keep derailing your story here. So now you're
It's easy to get off because there's a lot of
There's a
side
lot going
stories.
on
there,
there.
there's a lot of threads to pull on this topic. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, so you're tied in. So when did you make first contact with these people? Now that you're kind of bought in with the internet bullshit.
Probably ordered their mail order catalog. They had a National Vanguard Books was their book selling division. They had a good little catalog that had all the extremist books. One of the first ones I ordered, by the way, you were talking about how far back this shit goes. Was that who was that Frenchman that wrote the book about immigrants coming to Europe and flooding Europe? Great Replacement Theory book.
Oh, okay.
Oh, gotcha.
This was written in like the 70s or maybe the late 60s. I think it was the 70s.
Sure.
Can't remember the name of it now. I
Yeah,
had a
that
copy
sounds
of that.
familiar. It's like the first author of like the
John
Great Replacement
somebody,
Theory.
obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, this is exact same shit to this day. Europe has yet to go all dark skinned.
Yep.
Yeah,
50
we've
years
talked about
later.
that a little bit.
Yeah, we've kind of covered that too. But anyway, so you ordered the books, and then what?
You know, started paying dues like $15, $20 a month, whatever. May have been $30 a month is what I. But eventually, I got invited to a leadership conference up there. Also, I met local races. Like there was a local Klan presence, so I met them. Attended one of their rallies. Formed some bonds with them. And
So
yeah, they're about as dumb as you think they
were
are.
the
But
rallies complete with like the hoods and everything? Is it like the shit we see in the movies? Like, are they?
yeah, they do that. Uh, so it'll start during the daytime. They'll have tables set up with their propaganda materials, T-shirts, and things they're selling, kind of like a little fair.
Mm-hmm.
But after all that, when night falls, they'll stand across, or we stand across earlier in the day. It takes a lot of people to stand one of those things. They're big and heavy.
Yeah.
So they'll all go robe up, and they'll come out there and light it, and have this little ceremony where they stand around it, and there'll be like 30 of them. You know, not enough to take over the world, I guess,
Thank God. Yeah.
but enough to be dangerous,
No.
enough to spread their propaganda and
Yeah.
hate. Uh, and I mean, I don't find their message appealing to me, but it's going to be appealing to some of a different section of the southerner class.
Right.
Absolutely.
But you found it appealing back when you were, a teenager, or early 20s, when you're thinking of more the.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I found that because we have a common cause. There should be
Okay.
unity among these groups.
Got it.
You know, just like at the time, I thought we should outreach to. A lot of people don't like to admit this because they talk about Ukraine having Nazis. Russia had the most Nazis in Europe for a long time and still
Sure.
does. And even in the 90s, we wanted to outreach and connect with the Russian Nazis. Um, but, it was a worldwide thing, and the internet
You've been
made
working
that.
on Trump's campaign.
Oh, let's not even go into that.
Sorry.
Let's not even go into him and Stephen Miller and Stephen
my
Miller's
God. Yeah, no. Again,
background.
too many threads to pull.
Yeah. I didn't pay, like I said, we'll get into how modern politics after I get it.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I got deeper and deeper into the National Alliance. I went to a leadership conference. One of the things I find interesting that you might be interested in is during the conference, Pierce will get up there and he'll talk to the crowd. And this is only maybe 50 people from around the country,
Yep.
from around at least the eastern half of the country. And it's his best people. And he's trying to get more donations out of everybody. So he'll start at like whoever's paying this amount, will you go to $1,500 a month? We had two people in that crowd that were paying $1,500 a month.
Boy.
Can you
In the
imagine
late
paying
90s.
1,500? Can you imagine paying a mortgage payment just to be a racist?
Right. Back in the 90s, too.
Yeah, back
Or
in the
like-
90s,
Or
yeah.
20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
That's a mortgage payment on a big fucking house back then.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Anyways.
These were just bitter old, like one of them could barely walk. He was just a bitter old businessman with tons of money. He just wanted to be a Nazi. But there, and then it would go down to like 1,100, 12,000, 1,200, 1,100,000, go all the way down to where he'll get the people paying 30 to say they'll go up to 50.
Mm-hmm.
So he was good at raising the money, but it's astonishing just how much he was getting. And those 50 members are only a small percentage of the membership that was at that time.
Yep.
Right.
They were strong. They were strong back at that day.
So you got hooked
You
up
know.
with them there. You made some connections there because you moved up the ranks. I mean, you were.
Well, I mean, yeah, because I went back. I can't remember when I went back. It was in June or July. It was definitely summer.
Mm-hmm.
I went back up there for a week and spent a week with Dr. Pierce and the guy that ran that did all the maintenance around there, did all the building. I worked with him doing projects, building a stone wall,
Yeah.
working on it.
Mhm.
Changed out Dr. Pierce's water heater. Did a little target shooting up on the mountain, shit like that. But
So you say, is it Piers or Pierce?
Pierce, William Pierce. Oh, he's a legend in the white supremacy movement.
William Pierce.
Um,
I haven't heard of him.
You could trace him back all the way to Revelo P. Oliver and Willis Carto. The fascist movement in the United States has a deep history.
Oh, yeah.
And there's not that many personalities you really have to learn about to know the basics of it
Sure.
or the history.
All right. So you met basically the top dog. Then that's William Pierce was the.
The serial killer?
No, but his book, Hunter, was dedicated to Joseph Paul Franklin.
Just
Joseph Paul Franklin
um,
was the individual that shot Larry Flint,
Got it.
among others.
Oh,
He would
sure.
hunt he would hunt black and mixed race couples.
yeah, fucked up.
Classic.
Yeah. Dr. Pierce's book Hunter was dedicated to him, and it's about a guy that basically does that shit.
Wow.
Carries out assassinations.
Most dangerous game, but a
So
little
so
more
yeah,
racist.
you're at this convention and you're
So you meet the guys, you move up,
yeah.
and now you're involved, and you get involved. I mean, any amount's a little too much, but you get involved a little too much more than a little too much, right? What kind of happened then? Like, how did you go from what was the most egregious thing like you feel like you did, or the most involved you got in this whole organization? What was the peak of your involvement and that?
There were the weird thing about me is like I can't do the hate in person thing. I'm like, yeah, there's times when I'm full blown National Alliance member, but a mixed race couple doesn't bother me because I can't hate individuals that didn't do anything to me.
So you
So for
hated
some
an
reason,
idea, but not a person, basically.
yeah, and a lot of people don't have that issue.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm a little different in that regards.
Sure.
Also, these people generally they really think that they're doing what's right for their people.
Right.
They think that
I
they're
mean,
going to make the
obviously,
world
yeah.
better. Yeah. They don't realize they're being used so that this motherfucker gains power.
Yep.
Sure.
And
You know,
money,
it's all about
obviously,
power.
$1,500 a month from one guy. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
they're being
Yeah.
used for that too. I
Yours
mean,
gains power on the backs of these followers. Always give this guy power, just like Trump's followers. Massive cult, but still, it's he gains power off of them.
all right, but like, so like your total involvement, like where do you feel like that peaked for you?
Well, when the feds busted me.
Okay, I get that.
So what happened was I was recruiting. I would go out. I would pass out flyers and recruit and talk to people on job sites. And I met this guy who's from Montana, and this was probably a little over a year before I got busted. And we talked a good bit. And I would come over and visit him, and he lived on a boat in the river. And I didn't always believe everything he said. So lesson number one: somebody lies to you one fucking time, you think they're lying, and you verify it. Walk away from them. Never deal with them again.
Sure.
At that time, I was too forgiving of people. So this guy's a confidential informant, and some of the things he said didn't make sense to me, and I should have known he was lying. And if someone's lying, like I said, don't fuck with them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I have a big thing about truth, honesty. But yeah, he eventually after he disappeared for a while, then he came back into town. We were hanging out. He was telling me about this friend of his that had some grenades for sale, blah blah blah. And so eventually he talked me into it. I said, "All right, I'll get them." And the friend turned out to be an ATF agent, and they busted me at the meet. And it was a real stupid thing. I feel to this day I feel like a fool because I should have seen it. You know, it wasn't like it's the most eloquent law enforcement setup ever. It was just a regular confidential informant getting me to do something illegal.
It wasn't
And,
James Bond here, catching you in the
No.
act or anything like that. Yeah.
No. I mean, he didn't pull off a mask. There wasn't Tom Cruise under it.
Right. And you weren't really like buying the grenades for any really nefarious purpose other than just to kind of have them or
I think that if I had gone deeper, that there's a chance that eventually I could have been one of those guys.
Yeah.
You said
Sure.
at a certain point, you lose your humanity to this shit.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Every human has a killer in them inside them. We all know this. The whole thing about being civilized is keeping that killer at bay.
So
But
so
any of us can do it.
you said you were, it was dumb and you should have realized it, but almost in a way it's probably good that you didn't realize it. I mean, you're saying that this is kind of what derailed you off of your white nationalism, your Nazi train here.
I swear to God, laying on the ground with handcuffs on me, right then, I never would have broken the law again.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I mean, I did not. I would not have had to go to prison to understand that I didn't have to break the law.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Um, and you know, I'm very pro-gun, but I don't really hate the ATF over this. I did this.
Yeah. I mean, I hate the ATF, but that's a totally different thing. So
They're different things. I can respect some of their work. They're damn good with explosives and shit.
Mhm.
But yeah, they've done some fucked up stuff over the decades. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But in this case, I brought all this on myself.
Yep. And this was your come to Jesus moment if you weren't an atheist, right? So
Right? But I will say that didn't mean that I had given up the movement at that time. That would
Okay.
say that I gave up. I said I shouldn't have done that. What the hell was I thinking? You know, I'm cuffed and stuffed. I'm like,
so this just
this was
convinced you to
stupid.
be a law-abiding citizen, a
I could have
racist
been a
law-abiding
law-abiding Nazi.
citizen, but still a law-abiding
Yeah.
citizen. Okay. So then obviously you go to prison.
Mhm.
Um,
And they kind of fucked me. I had a plea agreement for 33 to 41 months. I should have got the lower end of that guideline. I would have only been gone a couple of years.
mm-hmm.
The prosecution was supposed to argue on my behalf to get that lower end of the guideline. The judge went straight to the statutory max, 120 months. So I got more time for that charge than probably anybody ever.
It does seem a little high
yeah.
for purchasing of illegal weapons
No
without
shit.
proven intent to do anything nefarious with them.
Yeah, I don't know. The
I will say
ATF,
this about that
in the
judge.
90s
He had no
was
sympathy for Nazis.
yeah. The ATF. I mean, which in all fairness, who should have sympathy for Nazis? Not that I mean, we
Yes.
appreciate that you're reformed and we've got sympathy for you now, but you know, Nazis buying grenades. I think it's kind of hard to find somebody to see.
He was, but you know, also he was old. He'd been on the bench a long time. I have no doubt that he should have known, or he knew that the ATF prodded a lot of this, or that the confidential informant led a lot of this.
Right.
But still,
Well, and it
it
almost
is what
sounds
it
like
is.
you would have had a case for entrapment if you had a decent lawyer.
You know, entrapment's almost impossible to prove.
John DeLorean figured it out when he bought a bunch of cocaine from a confidential informant.
I'm not familiar with that.
So you know John DeLorean, the guy who DeLorean Motor Company, the Back to the Future car.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I want one of those.
Yeah, when he was trying to get his car company up and going, and he was running out of money, and he had a confidential informant basically badger him into buying millions of dollars worth of cocaine, to sell to traffic, and then he got arrested by the FBI on drug trafficking charges because he bought a bunch of cocaine, and then he's like, well, I wouldn't have done this had they not approached me and pushed me into doing this. It was entrapment, and he got off on it. So, I mean,
Here's the thing about that.
huh?
To do that, you got to go to trial. And if you lose, they're going to stick you with the statutory max.
Sure.
But in
Which
my
you got
case,
anyway.
I wouldn't have lost anything because they gave me the statutory max after a plea deal.
Yeah, that's fucked up.
I did time with guys that actually detonated explosives and hurt people that had 7 years.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. That kind of shit doesn't surprise
most of the
me.
people I did time with that had similar charges as me had the 3 to 4 year range.
Sure.
Well,
I did time with one old man that was the Mountaineer militia from the East Coast, West Virginia, Pennsylvania area, and he had a 40 millimeter grenade and some other stuff, and he only did about 3 years.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you kind of got the short end of the stick on that one. But you went to prison. When did your ideology started to change? Because obviously, like you were saying, prison's very racially segregated, and you probably had an
To a degree, but I wasn't in a high security. I was in a low, which is it's double fenced, but the inmates are all in a dorm like area with little cubicles, usually three to a cube.
Okay.
And you know, we're in tight spaces, and it sucks because there's a lot of noise, and there's guys walking around whistling, or there's guys that will talk real loud. There's guys that will stand in the hallway face to face and carry on a conversation and block the whole goddamn hallway. There's guys from
It's like a
third world
Walmart,
countries.
basically.
Yeah, yeah. And there's guys from third world countries that don't know how to use washers and dryers. And there's a guy that will stand there at the dryer and take out one shirt, close it, restart it, fold his one shirt, put it, take out his next piece. While we're all in a row trying to, so it's irritating to live around a lot of people anyway. But
Mm-hmm.
and it can be stressful. You got to get along with folks
Okay.
because you don't want to be the guy that gets the hot oil poured on him in the middle of the night. You know.
I
Certainly
can
not.
imagine.
Certainly
I
not.
saw. I did see that happen to a guy that was a notorious asshole, and he learned a lesson.
So was it in prison that you started to come around, or when did that happen?
You know what? I would say that it took years because I can't. Looking back, I can't put a clear date on it. I can't say that I went from Nazi to liberal. You know,
December 4th, 1999 or whatever. Yeah, okay.
yeah, and I don't. I'm not sure it was fully done by the time I got out. But
Okay.
I will say that some things that really helped me. TikTok is great because once you get into the
Mhm.
algorithm of the liberal stuff, it throws you more liberal stuff,
Mhm.
and it keeps you from going up. But on the other hand,
Once you get into the
algorithms
algorithm
get a
of the
lot of
conservative,
people.
it finds you an echo
Yeah,
chamber, that's for sure, and you have to work
yeah.
to challenge that echo chamber, no matter what side of the aisle you're on with that.
But I
So,
like the echo chamber. It says, "Hey, humans are humans. Don't go out killing people." Whereas the other one says, "Hey, them there, they got to be killed."
mhm.
You know,
Right.
Uh,
because they're different.
so
So
how
yeah,
how how did this? So you got out. It was a slow transition into realizing that all that shit. You were sold a bunch of bullshit, and you bought it, and you had to be deprogrammed, and that took you a
yeah,
while. And it
it
sounds
took a
like you
while.
did a lot of that just kind of with your own um
I had a lot of good friends in prison, and almost none of them were white Americans. My best friend was, and he was a bank robber and a damn good dude, and he killed himself after a year after he got out.
Oh, that's sad.
And but all my other friends were Mexican, Guatemalan, Honduran, Colombian, uh, Black Americans.
Mm-hmm.
I would go. I could get away with going into the black TV room and fucking around with them dudes because they like. I got along great with the people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like a fucking social butterfly, which is weird for a Nazi,
Yeah.
you know. But in there, I mean, also I learned Spanish, so I'd watch TV with the Mexicans, and so I was fluent in Spanish. I'm still pretty good at it. Listened to a lot of Hispanic music. I studied French for a while. I had a Chinese buddy. I tried to learn. His English was so bad, and his willingness to learn English was so poor that I tried to learn Chinese just to fuck with him. But
So that's cool. So it's almost just experiencing other people for the people that they were probably is what's kind of started to make that change. Which is so. I mean,
um,
I've always said that travel and experiencing other cultures is the best education you can get, and the biggest thing for fighting ignorance and hate. I mean, obviously you're not doing a lot of traveling in prison, but you are experiencing a lot of other cultures, and it opened your mind a little bit.
I would say one of the best things was it was the first time I was ever around trans people, and I did not realize, for over the last 2 decades we just called them trannies, and now that I'm on the liberal media, I learned that look, that's offensive. I shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
use that word, and so I mean, don't block that out. I'm giving a good example
Yep.
here,
No,
Yeah.
no, no. We totally get
but
it.
like, and but they were great people. I
Mm-hmm.
obviously, and none of them were there for sex offenses. Every single pedo in there was a straight white male Bible thumper.
Every fucking
Every fucking
time.
one. Yeah,
Usually is.
Yep.
and I mean that was a wake up call. Right now, you're seeing them demonized for something they don't do,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
while the right is the ones doing it all. It's disgusting. But I had one for a cellmate when I was in the hole. I was when you're in segregated housing, they usually try to put you in a cell with somebody of your own race.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So the only white dude that was in the hole at one time with me was an old biker dude that farted constantly. You ever been in like a closet with a guy that farted 24/7?
Yikes.
I begged him to move me. And I said, "Look, put me in with Brittany." We had a trans person on the yard that had blonde hair, so her nickname was Britney Spears. When you have trans people on the yard, they're treated like they're real women,
Yep.
and people are and even though they don't have hormones and stuff in there, and they start to transition a little bit.
Right, for sure.
Now, if, like every
It's
yard
crazy
will
though.
have
They respect their
um,
pronouns more in fucking prison than these assholes out here. And
Right, just out on the street.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true actually. Like there'll be if you have a black tranny on the yard, she is Coco. You know, we had a Coco,
mm-hmm.
great girl. So you know, I got along great with them.
Mm-hmm.
The one I was cellmates with for 2 weeks gave me all this background information about growing up on a farm in Iowa, knowing that she was gay from a very young time,
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
showing me stories about being gay and how it is, and it was it was fascinating. It was definitely educational. Um, I will say, uh, you know how they make a big deal out of the trans athletes and stuff.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
I'm not going to defend either side of this, but I will say I wrestled this smaller trans male to female, and that was a handful. So
To be
maybe
fair,
it's because
I
we
know
came
some
up
women I wouldn't get in a fight with either. So,
exactly,
That's true.
exactly.
but
Yeah,
all
and I
right.
can handle I can handle most guys, but this one was strong from being on the farm and carrying and working on the farm
Yo.
his entire
Sure.
life,
hmm
So I almost felt bad for anybody that tried to attack him.
Well, hey, I mean, it's something that probably a good thing because unfortunately they are subjected to probably a bit
Oh yeah,
more.
it's terrible because I mean they ain't hurt nobody. You
Absolutely.
know,
Well, and I mean, and that's kind of a beautiful thing that you saw that and you had that open mind, especially considering your background. And it kind of sounds like that's where your reformation came from. How did all that like affect your family? Because you said you got kids, right? And I don't know what your.
it was pretty bad because I know you read the newspaper articles.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a babysitter. My wife was at work. So when I went to the meet with my friend, I had my 1 year old in the truck in the car seat,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, that made me look real bad. I'm like, didn't have anything else to do with him,
Yep.
and I was talking with him today, and I said, look, man, I did everything with you when I was a kid. We even cried together. But yeah, from
Sure, he really
he was
appreciates that
working.
sentiment.
Well, it sounds
No,
like you still
but
got a good relationship with your kids, which I mean,
I
I
have great. I have a great relationship with almost everybody I ever met,
that's
except for the
awesome.
Nazis.
Yeah.
Now I'd just punch a Nazi.
That, that's
Or
that's that's good. There's only one good Nazi, right?
yeah, there's only
Reformed
Um,
one.
Nazi?
exactly. A
Uh,
reformed
what
Nazi,
I
reformed by
went
any means
through,
necessary.
what I went through might have been my fault, but it wouldn't have happened if they didn't exist.
mm-hmm.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
It didn't come
So,
naturally to you to be
Right.
hateful toward a group of people and sort of
yeah, I mean,
scapegoat them.
Mm-hmm.
like that meme. I saw a meme a couple of days ago on Threads where all the little kids are playing together just fine until their parents come over,
Yep.
and each of their parents is a different religion, and then it just has all the kids fighting,
No.
and like
Racism and xenophobia and just prejudices in general, they're learned. It's learned
yeah,
behavior. So, and unfortunately, it's usually learned because of the people that we know and respect and the environments that we're in. And obviously, you probably know that better than anybody. So, uh,
yeah,
that it's an amazing story because it's not often you hear about people who have done this who can own it. I mean, the fact that you own it and you're willing to talk about it like this, and just say,
I
hey,
don't
this
have a
is what I
choice.
did, this is where I was at, this is what I've come to be, and I've learned that this is not the way that people should be, and that this group of people, is bad for
Well,
society as a whole, and it was bad for you obviously in your life and your family. Um, and you're not alone in the fact that you got sucked into this. You're not alone in the fact that this is something obviously, and we see it.
God
I
no,
think
look
I think
around
it
right now.
I think it's much more present in all of our minds because growing up, I grew up in the '90s, and obviously like there was white supremacists and there was people doing there was these extremists that they more sort of stuck to themselves. You didn't see it in your face as much. They were politically ostracized a little bit more, and now we're seeing it.
Definitely.
we're seeing it be a bit more mainstream. You know, they got platformed a bit more with the Tea Party, and then MAGA and Donald Trump, and now, you know, there's fine people on both sides, and all this kind of shit, and it's giving more of a safe space for people who are vulnerable to this kind of propaganda, vulnerable to falling into the same things that you fell into. But for a lot of us, you know, like especially here in Minnesota, growing up, like it's not we don't see this as much.
No.
And I think a lot of people don't have the ability to empathize and understand where it comes from and how people get involved.
Well, I mean, especially when you're talking to, I grew up in the Twin Cities, roughly. Kind of went to high school in a smaller town, but it was still like, had a couple liberal colleges, so it was a fairly liberal small town. So, and for Minnesota, even small towns sometimes are not all that like rural conservative that you think they are. It's hard to conceive of even like meeting somebody in person, or just like going to the sites that you went to when you were growing up, and sort of going through that process. It's difficult to imagine what exactly that looks like, and how somebody could possibly get that far down the line.
Even because you said you were recruiting and you were going to like you were doing Jehovah's Witness bullshit, except for the Nazis, and you're showing up at job sites and handing out pamphlets and shit. And like, to me, that's just like I mean, it's bad enough for me to be polite to the Mormons when they knock on my door, and now I'm like, I just imagine a Nazi showing up and trying to hand me a pamphlet, and it not going well in that interaction. So it's hard to picture that. But obviously there's places that are hotbeds for this kind of stuff. And we were talking earlier, and you said, it was you almost felt like more of an outcast when you decided to be a Democrat than you were as an out in the open, out of the closet fucking Nazi. Like, you were a Nazi in the world. You were not hiding that. And you felt more accepted in your community than when you became a Democrat.
If not accepted, I definitely there was no real pushback, except I gave you the example of the guy that I met in the store.
Sure.
But there was like my family, my dad, at least non-racist, completely non-racist. And my grandpa on that side was the same way. The women in the family a little bit more so, but I mean, the guys, we're all pretty laid back and don't give a fuck, and like I said, it was even able to draw me in, and how it did that.
So
Just,
so
it's
how
fucking
and
amazing.
so that's how is like I think if your story has anything to provide for other people aside from just being a crazy story, I mean, very thankfully not quite American History X vibes, but close. What what should people be aware of in themselves? Because we all have, like you said, they can suck you in, they can suck anybody in the right circumstances, in the right situation. How do they do it? What is the tricks? What is the things that people need to be aware of? What is it, if you had been more conscious of, may have saved you from going down this path?
I think I should have done more research into the other side of everything. Like, they'll always bring up these same fake history stories about how the Jews did this, or the Rothschild family, and the whole thing with them making money off of the war. But all that's a myth. It was a fucking lie. It's completely made up. But I didn't know that at the time, and I didn't research it. I should have researched that. Now, you got more resources for that today. Like I mentioned, Knowledge Fight. And how they go in over a lot of the bullshit that Alex Jones talks about, and do a lot of debunking. Debunking podcasts are great if the person gets hooked on those before he gets hooked on the right wing shit. Because once you get on the right wing shit, you're not going to want the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not going to want it. People, there might be a Nazi watching this right now that's just going to discount everything I say because he's so deep in, he don't want to believe me.
Sure.
But he's being used. And he's being fed a lie, and it's going to end up destroying this country. And the only reason I'm really adamant about this is that this isn't going to hurt a few individuals. We stand to lose millions of lives if these people take power,
Mm-hmm.
and we see how close they are.
Right. I mean, we've already seen some self-proclaimed Nazis do some pretty horrific violence, even just in the last 10 years.
Well, I
Much
mean,
less,
Dylan Roof, I think, is a great example.
Right,
The people the guy who drove his car through the crowd of people
yeah,
in
in
Virginia or
Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I was
and
also thinking of like the synagogue down in was it Virginia, and then there's also like that black church I think as well.
Dylan Roof, that
Dylan
was a
Roof,
black
okay,
church,
yeah.
South Carolina.
But,
yeah,
you know,
so
we see it worldwide. We see what if we lose Ukraine, if the fascists take France, and if Orban keeps Hungary, and if Bolsonaro hadn't lost in Brazil. I mean, the fascist movement worldwide is they
God,
took
the fact that the Republicans are openly praising and worshiping and inviting Orban to come speak at their committees and things. I mean, this isn't a hypothetical.
fucking
And
Bolsonaro was at Mar-a-Lago, wasn't he?
yeah, I can't confirm that. I don't know off the top of my head, but it would not surprise me. I mean, you know,
Yeah. I mean, and they're so closely aligned with the Russians and the Saudis, and which obviously is why they don't want us to be energy independent. They
Yep.
keep talking about drill, drill, drill. We're under record oil production now, but
Yeah.
the reason they don't want renewable energies to take hold in this country is as long as we're using oil, it benefits two of our enemies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all of this shit should be so obvious to anybody, but when you're caught up in that cult, they can't see it.
yeah. So you'd agree it is a cult? Like it is? You felt you
Oh,
were
no
in a
doubt.
cult?
White supremacy itself, the whole movement is a cult. Just because it's not an outright religion, it's a cult behavior.
All right, and something you said to me that just kind of stuck with me when we talked earlier was you said when we talk about these people being Nazis, like we talk about I don't want to say all Trump supporters, but certainly the more extreme of Trump supporters and Proud Boys and these white nationalists, when we come out and we call them Nazis, you want to tell me what or tell the people what you said about that, because they are Nazis. They want to say we use that as like an insult or a
Because
slur.
they deny it constantly, but they attack the exact same groups. They use the exact same propaganda techniques. They do the exact same shit. I believe there was somebody that said a rose by any other name smells the same. I don't give a fuck if you don't think you're a Nazi. You're doing Nazi shit. You're a Nazi. That's all there is to it.
And you were a Nazi, so like you're
I would think I would know,
speaking
but-
from a place of some authority here when you say that like these people are genuinely doing Nazi things. They are genuinely Nazis, even if they're not. They're trying to call themselves something a little rosier, something a little prettier. They're Nazis, and I mean, and we see it, when people show up to rallies with Klans hoods and Confederate flags and all this kind of stuff. Like, these are the people who obviously believe these things and are associated with people who may not go that far publicly, but they're still part of the movement. You would suggest that they are still Nazis.
These people aren't known for their clear thinking. I mean, these motherfuckers will fly a rebel flag while they bitch about human trafficking. You know what I mean?
That is a fair point.
Yeah,
Not one I've actually considered
Right,
before.
Pizzagate takes a whole new light if you think about it from that lens.
Yeah. You don't get any more human trafficking than that, dude.
No,
Right.
that is a fair point. And then so the other thing you said that kind of really drove you away and what drove you nuts about it was the cognitive dissonance and the hypocrisy of it when you started to realize that. You started to look at things a little bit more honestly.
One of the reasons I'm not a Christian, one of the reasons that I was able to see through religion. Now, obviously, I was religious through my teenage years. It was probably my early 20s when I finally gave up on that bullshit. But I mean, that stuff will poison your mind. But being non-religious should have made it a lot harder for them to get me. But like the right wing, as we discussed, they have a little something for everybody. And if you're an atheist, they have this neo-Nazi group that doesn't focus on Christian religion.
Sure.
You know what I mean? They focused on other shit to get you in there. And, they talk about Rush Limbaugh being a way to get you go from Rush to Alex Jones and from Alex into harder stuff. And sooner or later, you're listening to Red Lights Radio. or back in my day, it would have been National Vanguard. Which, by the way, they're still in production. I was looking them up the other day. Kevin
Jeez.
Strom, pedo, is running it now.
That's
So,
surprising.
and I'm sure they will eventually get wind of this. Fuck them.
Pretty much.
But yeah, like I said, that whole right wing propaganda game, it's strong, and when they once they get in, it's hard to get out, and eventually,
So aside from
eventually it's
looking at both sides, because we want to figure out, um, you know, how people get into it, and part of it for you is the networking, right? Like the interacting with other people, and even you said you're not really a people person, but even that sort of sucked you, and obviously you started going to the Klan meetings, and then you started going to the national meetings, and you hung out with William Pierce, and you networked with these people, and is networking easier when you have just a goal of removing liberties? Do you feel that way? I mean, because obviously, like
you know the funny thing about Nazis, they think they're freedom fighters, even though everything they stand for is going to be taking away freedoms. But I mean, I don't think that you see all this stuff that don't tread on me shit while they're
Right.
treading on everybody else.
Right.
They don't get it. You
yeah.
know? They don't
Yeah,
get it
I
that
mean,
they're more
do-
free under the Democrats than they ever will be under Republicans.
Right, where it's usually a projection, or rather, it's always a projection.
It's always a projection. I
of-
mean, we could play movies on them if they projected anymore, but
right.
Yeah, I
Well,
told you that on the phone earlier about how my two people I know came over. They're both felons. They're both white. They're talking to me. I'm a white felon. They're telling me that blacks commit all the crimes.
right.
Fucking three
Yeah.
white felons in a group talking about blacks committing crime.
Yeah. There's a little bit of cognitive
Yeah.
dissonance there, maybe.
Right over
ran
there.
into the point any harder to impale you. But
Yeah.
It just and here's the thing, like right now, I'm building a tiny little off-grid home in the woods in Alabama, and all my neighbors are black, and they're all the same family, and they're all damn good guys. And last October, I had people try to break into my place, and I didn't have cell cameras at the time. I had a couple of game cameras watching it. Now they found one and took it, but I got another one on video, and it was two white dudes, some pure fucking white trash, looked like they just came from a Trump rally. And as soon as I called somebody up to tell them I had my place broke into, I said, "I thought you said those blacks don't steal." Motherfucker, it was two white dudes. Leave my neighbors the hell out of this. So, I mean, you tell me the systemic racism isn't real when two of the first people I called tried to blame it on my black neighbors. When I had video evidence.
it's true. Obviously, with my content, you've probably heard that I was dealing with people prejudiced against my African
I heard,
American
yeah,
tenant.
those were good videos.
Yep. So I mean, it's everywhere, and that was kind of a real eye opener to me. Is you always think, well, it's not my people, it's not the people that I know around me, and that kind of thing. And again, and that's just how ignorant even somebody who tries to be as informed and as enlightened as I am. Like when you start seeing it around you, and I was always a little bit shyer to go to it's racially motivated, because I never thought about things that way, and it's hard for me to imagine other people thinking about things that way, but that it very much is. And I think it maybe doesn't do any good to call everybody a racist for doing stuff that seems racist, but it's a lot of times is, even if
they
they
don't
wanna
realize
admit it.
they don't realize how deeply ingrained it is into them. It's the little things like that that show it, and we don't generally pay it attention in our day lives. We don't really realize we're doing it. And like right now, if somebody pops up, if my cellular camera goes off and there's somebody at my gate, I'll call one of my neighbors and they'll go up there with a gun if they got to. And they're good.
It's the kind of
dudes.
neighbors you need to have.
And
Hopefully, you don't need to have them, but it's not the worst thing to have them, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I'm happy. I'm going to be happy when I finally move there and I'm off grid and I've got me 9 little acres that I'm going to be, living away from most everybody.
So still living that prepper lifestyle.
Hey, I figure it's best to stay get away from people. I don't like the traffic. I don't like the crowds. I like the country life. I want to get and it's away from most of my family.
Yeah,
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair
you can't
point
beat
there. something we can all remember in this holiday season and appreciate a little bit.
Yeah,
Right.
you don't want to be too
Yeah.
close to family.
Exactly.
Gets you off. When you go through the Christmas holidays, sometimes we all feel like we'd like to live off grid for a little while, where they can't get a hold of us.
The thought crosses your mind for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I was watching some of your TikTok content here, Chris, before
My
the
TikTok
interview.
sucked. I was really good on YouTube back in the day. I made really good outdoor videos, trapping videos, stuff like
Sure.
that. I shifted more to construction because I don't have time to go out and trap. Uh, yeah, that's one of the. I like to do away with the liberal stereotype. I'm not some guy that wears skinny jeans and I don't have purple hair or anything. I
Sure.
will kill a beaver or a pig, and I'll do it with a knife. So, if the right wing fuckers think they're the only guys out there that are semi tough or can use a gun or can use a knife, yeah.
I mean,
Right.
I definitely look like your stereotypical, soy boy liberal, right?
What? Not at
Yeah,
all.
I mean that's what I think of every time. Like, boy, Jordan could really use a makeover.
I'll get my mani petties every week.
It would.
Most of them, I mean, hell,
Clipping your
these
nails
people,
kind of sucks.
these
Not gonna
people-
lie.
they were bitching because they couldn't get their Starbucks and they were expected to wear a mask every now and then. I mean, goddamn, dude, it's not that hard.
Yeah, I
Dude,
mean, I didn't
Talk
feel
to the
like,
World War II generation that went through rationing and blackouts and all that shit.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh
These
my
guys
God,
are
today I
outstanding.
can't even imagine these fuck.
Oh, that privilege thing, it's real, buddy.
Yeah, but it's always
I've
the
seen-
people bitching about how privileged everybody else is and entitled and everything.
Yeah, I've seen a few come into the prisons with some minor charge, but they had a little bit of money, and they come in there acting like they're somebody. But you ain't nobody in here.
I bet.
Uh,
I bet.
they ain't nothing
yeah.
special.
So going back to your TikTok stuff, I found like there was a lot of videos out there. A couple of your bigger ones were involved with networking of right wing people and just that whole like conservative sort of media conglomerate, but also just sort of discussing how, like you pointed out, actually pretty correctly, according to like pretty reputable research centers, that like Republicans are vastly more white and don't contain that many people, POC type people.
Did you see that every time they get together?
right, yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
I've had
They
them
make
tell
a
me
point of
that
showing
the
like
Democrats.
the one person at the Trump rally who's
Right.
not white. Like, look, see, we've got lots of black
They
supporters.
got the
Here's
T-shirt.
the one of
They
them
fight-
now.
But yeah, I mean, you'll get a lot of them to say, "Oh, the right's not the racist; it's the Democrats." I'm like, the Democrat Party is like half black female, you know. And when Charlottesville happened, that wasn't unite the left; it was unite the right.
right,
No, it was a false flag. It was definitely Antifa, BLM.
right.
Oh,
Same
yeah.
as Jan 6, obviously.
Yep, and yeah, exactly.
Damn commies. But
It's just them trying to make the Republicans look bad because they don't do that on their own.
Well, so I was thinking, is this right wing element? Is it in any way? Do you feel like a major contributor to what is widely seen as a widening gap between the left and the right, and just like general, populist, the normal citizens?
yeah, I don't think the left is all that radical. I mean, it's we've had like we were discussing earlier, and like AOC has pointed out numerous times in some of her memes and posts about how she gets called radical for wanting health care, and like the
Right.
other side wants to kill millions of people. So
or restrict rights or liberties.
yeah, but
Yeah,
we know
one's
where
that-
it's
one
going.
what one extremist side is, wanting to kick out millions of people in the country and take away your right to vote and your right to health care, and the other side's like, their extremism is like, you should maybe be able to go to the doctor when you don't feel good and not go bankrupt in the process. Like,
I don't know.
it's a both sides thing, man. You really got to weigh.
Both sides have good people, obviously.
Well, they're so goddamn scared that somebody might tax them an extra $1 to make our society a little bit better.
Right? How dare they?
And
You know what?
You just
It's a
tax.
lot
We've
cheaper
got
to-
people with lots of money who don't pay that much taxes, and they used to pay a lot more taxes, and they
Yeah.
could pay a couple more dollars in taxes again, and then we would maybe have the money to not
I don't
let
bitch
people
about
die
my
in the
taxes.
streets for no reason.
I'm self-employed. I have a relatively low on the books income because most of my expenses come from the business.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a much of a personal life, so my taxes
Mm-hmm.
aren't really oppressive. I don't
Mm-hmm.
mind if they go to help somebody. It's
Yeah.
just because I'd rather it's cheaper to pay somebody. It's cheaper to buy somebody at home and get them off the street than it is to put them in prison. You know,
Absolutely.
it's
Or
a
even
lot.
just let them live on the street. It's cheaper to just put people in homes than to pay for the societal costs of them living on the
Yeah,
street and ending up in the ERs and the cost of police that you need to go deal with them and everything like that.
Right. Not to mention the
yeah, we take
bad
the
like
exact wrong
PR you get.
approach to just
Mm-hmm.
about every issue. We take the most. We will pay double to hurt somebody.
Oh my God, yeah, it's insane to me that like people
And
are
here's the
are are that committed to being hateful, um, and so I don't know how do we because we got to wrap this up, and I think that that's a good thing to point out. Some people can be so committed to being hateful. How do we how do we address that? How do we stop people from being hateful? There's
Just how do we reach the people that were sort of
Mhm.
like you as a
I don't know if you
young 20
can.
some year old.
I did give him an example earlier that some little things, a little bit of pushback. I was in a store. I was in a Walmart one time back in the late '90s. I was wearing a Klan's T-shirt. It said "The Original Boys in the Hood," and this guy sees it and he just goes off. He says, "That's racist," and he starts screaming at me right there in Walmart. And his strong feelings about that and his opinion carried with me and left a mark on me to this day. And another thing, there were little things like one time you're talking about Klan rallies. One time after a rally over in Mobile County, we leave the rally. It's me and a couple of guys, and we go into a strip bar. Not really my thing. I can see boobs for free most places, but we go in there. I'm hanging out with these two guys, and there's a couple Mexicans in there. And these Mexicans are just watching the dancers. They ain't hurting nobody. They're not bothering anybody. And the two Klan guys say, call me over and say, "Hey, he's watching these white girls. That ain't right." And I didn't. And here I am, full-grown National Alliance member, and even
Mhm.
that didn't really bother me.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm a little bit different kind of Nazi. I guess I was,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
because a
clearly
lot
a
of people
little.
get their ass beat with baseball bats for shit like that in other
Mhm.
places.
Yeah.
And these Klan guys told them to leave. Told them there's some bad people in here, and you guys need to leave. And they didn't put up a fight. And they left and everything. But to this day, that still bothers me
Sure.
because most of my best friends now are Hispanic. Like I said, I
Mhm.
speak
So
Spanish
you're
now.
saying even if it's not necessarily a like a sit-in of like your closest, like a, what are they called,
An intervention.
intervention, you don't
Mhm.
need
Yeah.
necessarily like a family style intervention, even if it is just somebody
Well, that's
Some
just
that was
random guy in
coming up to you in a
Walmart.
random or
Mhm.
public space saying, hey,
yeah.
that's hateful and you should be ashamed.
So
Between that and the fact that on a human to human level, I felt bad about what we did. Just running off two guys from a strip
Right.
club. That's not right. That
Mhm.
that always ate at me too.
I mean, you
So
probably saved him some money that night, so long run, maybe it
Yeah.
was for the best. But
I probably
I'm totally
did.
joking on that.
I probably did.
But no, I think the takeaway from that story is that we all have a responsibility to. What is it they always tell us at the airport? If you see something, say something.
Right.
like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
don't
If you see something, say
don't.
something.
It's really hard to stand up to people in public and speak out against what's wrong. And we all like to think that we're going to be the person to do that when you're in those situations, but it's hard to be that person a lot of the time.
True.
And and you heard it here that being that person, sometimes just saying that thing, calling somebody out for being the asshole that they're being, you may never see or hear or know that had an outcome, that changed somebody's life, that stuck with them and helped them become a better person, and therefore helped all the people that they may have hurt in the process.
Right.
But it's that, as a society, I think we need to call this out and not tolerate it.
Yeah,
as much.
I mean, as much as I don't want to leave with the message that like you individually can
Yeah.
stop right wing
No,
and hate and
absolutely
Nazism,
not.
you know, I think
No,
there's
no, there's
certainly
really only one way to stop it, and it ain't legal.
Um,
right.
When it comes
but
down to the brass tacks of this, they
mhm.
respect nothing but physical violence. That's all
No.
they respect. Power.
But if we can, if we can help people recognize this in themselves before they get to that point too, and what you
Yeah,
said is always considering like looking up opposing perspectives, and this is something that I believe is really important, something
Yeah.
that we try to do on a regular basis, is even if we don't agree with the opposing perspective, looking it up, hearing what the other side has to say,
At least getting the facts straight.
getting and figuring out the facts, figuring out the best interpretation, the best understanding, the best grasp of a situation you can have is important. Never take anything you hear at face value, ever, ever, ever. I even tell people who follow me, I'm like, don't fucking listen to what I have to listen to what I have to say, sure, but don't take it for granted. Do not repeat
Do a
this
Google search
until
know?
you've verified, because I'm human, I make mistakes, and I'm not trying to mislead you, but there's plenty of people out there who are trying to mislead you,
Right.
who are doing it on purpose and are good at it, are good at sounding authoritative, are good at sounding like they've got the information. And if we don't hold ourselves accountable for that, that's what allows us to fall into it. And I don't know what we can do beyond that to really fight this.
Right. It's like media literacy should be like taught in like schools. It's like kind of brought up as like a sort of a right wing talking point,
Didn't
but
California just put in some classes about that, how to spot fake news? But
yeah,
I can't
it's
remember.
honestly it's not the worst idea. It's probably one of the best ideas
Yeah.
I've heard come from any conservative in the last 10 years. But sort of that mindset of media literacy or in the sense of like extremist literacy and understanding when people say like something extreme about another group of people, not just like an individual, but like just have a extreme prejudice against a group of people, and having that be a red flag for anybody and everybody.
Not just based on race. I mean,
Right,
when people
yeah, of
talk
course.
about liberals, or people talk about Jewish people or
Yeah, that's
Muslim
them to-
people, or any group of people where you're just putting a label on everybody who fits under this umbrella, fits into this column, this category, this definition.
Right. It's okay not to think like highly of a particular like group if they've shown themselves and they've done things and they put out this message, but to hate if you run into a person that somehow like follows that sort of group, to be hateful towards that person individually is outrageous.
Unless they're Nazis.
Well, right. Or just on when you first meet them, like you shouldn't think, oh, because they're wearing a MAGA hat, they're like a piece of shit Nazi.
Right,
They're
yeah.
just somebody who they're following that right now, and I don't know.
And maybe because again, we are all products of our environment. We're products
Right.
of the
Clearly.
people around us.
Well, we
and-
preach that all the time about like the causes of crime and being poorly educated. It's like, it's not. We don't think it's the people who are born in that position.
No.
That's the case. That they're more likely to succumb to crime and gangs, whatever. It's the same situation for white people who become hateful against minorities.
Right, or just buy into a social political ideology like MAGA, because that's what everybody. I mean, it's around here all the time. I see it. There's plenty of people around here who that's what all of their friends are doing, and because all their friends are doing, they're doing it. They're one more friend who is now one of all of the friends who are doing it,
Right.
and it's just all the cool kids are doing it. That's the way that they get on with it. And so yeah, not making that assumption. Now again, if they show up in a hood or with an armband on,
Right. No.
there's certain levels where it's just like, okay, all of those people we can agree, but also those are choices that you're making at that point that go
True.
beyond a certain thing. But if
clearly
you're-
choices of consequences.
But yeah, I think that those are the two things. Is if and when you have the ability to hold somebody accountable, you should, especially if it's people you care about, especially when it's
Yeah,
people you
well,
care
right.
about. But even when it's not, like the guy in the Walmart did to Chris.
Obviously, don't put yourself in harm's way.
No,
right?
no, do
Chris
not
was
put
mentioning
yourself.
The physical violence being one of the few things that matter to the people in that situation, but don't put yourself in harm's way.
Do not put yourself in
right?
harm's way. Absolutely not. But if you are in a position to hold somebody accountable, in any way, shape, or form, it may be beneficial to do that, and then just hold yourself accountable. I think more than anything else is learning, understanding why you have your perspectives, and making sure that that the people who don't share your perspectives, why they don't share them, whether you agree with them or not. Understanding the
Understanding
opposing,
overcomes, right?
understanding the opposing perspectives. So thank you so much, Chris, for coming on and chatting with us. As always, we ran over time here because we cannot hold a schedule.
Or our mouths.
This is one of those subjects. I mean, we could go for months.
Oh yeah,
Right.
absolutely. But it's a really fascinating story. And I appreciate that you reached out to me. I appreciate you coming on here and talking about this. It's
Hey,
cool
man,
to
nobody
see.
else will listen.
Hey,
You listen, nobody else.
we love listening to this. I think that this is a beautiful story. I mean, obviously, you hear about people getting sucked into this stuff, but seeing people find their way out and learn and grow, and that's the thing is that's something that's possible, and any way we can facilitate that, your story holds a lot of power, I think, because of that, and that's amazing. So thank you again so much for being on. You do have a TikTok channel. It's it does not.
No.
I think
I
that
don't
I
put a
think
lot
that
of effort into that.
no, and I get that. Obviously you're not doing it out there. I wouldn't say that you're like out there being a creator, but you share videos, you share your stories sometimes. You have a YouTube channel. You can share any of that stuff if you want people to check it out.
That's Chris Gilliam off grid. But like I said, my old videos were mostly trapping. My newer ones are tiny home and off grid and building and stuff.
Hey,
Eventually, I went back
and
to
that's cool
killing
stuff
stuff.
too.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
we certainly appreciate you being on and sharing your story. And honestly, I have a ton of respect for somebody who went through all that and came out the other side, and then is just willing to own it and say, yeah, this is part of my past. This is part of my history. This is the story of my life, and not all of it is pretty or neat or something to be proud of necessarily. But you
We
share.
all have those moments, and some people's moments last longer than others. But hopefully we can all come back to just being working from a state of just appreciating people that are around you, and not
and nobody's beyond reprisal. Like
Right.
you can make these decisions, you can do these kinds of things, and it doesn't mean that you can't come back. You can't make better decisions. You can't change your life trajectory, right? Like you can't learn from your mistakes and become a better person and help other people be better people, because I feel like that's what you're doing now.
We've got no choice but to bring some of these people back from the edge, because otherwise we're headed for what Germany looked like in the 1940s, and the same end result on a larger
Sure.
scale. I mean, people do not understand how rabid these people are about killing.
Yeah,
just-
I
They're being held
Yeah,
back.
no, I don't think we fully appreciate, at least on an everyday basis, nearly the amount of hate and the
These
overall
these people
trajectory.
should have the exact same mindset as the same ones that put little kids in gas chambers. So
that
I mean,
is just
people
and
haven't
it's just
changed.
it's crazy. It's crazy, but it's nice to have, not nice, but it's good to have the reminder that these people exist, and we need to be vigilant
Yeah.
about it. And we need to be vigilant about the fact that a lot of these people are probably a lot like you, and a lot of the stuff doesn't sit right with them, but they feel like they're part of a group, or they're involved in something that the bigger picture makes sense to them at the time. And these people aren't beyond saving. These people aren't beyond leading a better life, and not living with such hate that can be so negatively affecting the rest of society. And I just really appreciate your story. I appreciate you being on, and thank you so much for hanging out with us today and having a conversation.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, until next time, guys.
Yeah, like you said, appreciate your time. But we'll certainly maybe have you on again, and have another conversation.
I hope so.
All right, Chris.
Thank you guys. Once again, thank you everybody for listening. We love you all. Check out the TikTok account. We really need to get that up to 1,000 followers so we can add the the thing in the bio for it. So you can link directly to the podcast through this. And we can start sharing other links through the link in bio type shit. Follow us on Instagram. Check out our merch on offjawagon.com. And we will see you next week.
Yeah. Appreciate you listening.